Once upon a time in the chilly lands of Russia, there was a ruler who really didn't like beards. His name was Peter the Great, and he was great in many ways, tall, ambitious, and always thinking about how to make Russia look a little more like the fancy countries of Europe. Now you might think a beard is just a beard, but to Peter, it was a hairy symbol of old-fashioned thinking. And Peter? He was all about new ideas, shiny shoes, and apparently smooth chins. So one day, Peter looked around and saw a lot of beards. Big beards, small beards, curly beards, and beards that probably had their own zip codes. He thought, if I want Russia to look modern, maybe I should start with the faces. And just like that, the great beard tax was born. Yes, you heard right, a tax on beards. Imagine waking up one morning and finding out your facial hair now had a price tag. But Peter didn't just stop at the idea. He actually made it law. If you wanted to keep your beard, you had to pay up. No money, no beard. It was that simple. And to make sure everyone knew who had paid, Peter gave out little tokens, tiny, shiny coins that said you were an official tax-paying beard owner. It was like a VIP club, but instead of velvet ropes, you got a medallion for your chin. People were understandably a bit confused. Some were angry. Some tried to hide their beards under scarves. Others just gave up and shaved, probably muttering about Peter's obsession with smooth faces. But the tax collectors were everywhere, and they had one job: find the beards, collect the money, and keep Russia looking sharp. Of course, not everyone could afford the tax. The poor, the peasants, and the monks, they all had different rules. Monks, for example, were allowed to keep their beards, probably because even Peter didn't want to argue with a monastery full of grumpy bearded men. But for everyone else, it was pay or shave. Now you might be wondering, how much did this beard tax cost? Well, it depended on who you were. Rich nobles paid more, regular folks paid less, and the really unlucky ones got their beards shaved off in public. Talk about a bad hair day. But here's the best part. The tokens. These little beard medals became collectibles. Some people wore them proudly like a badge of honor. Others tried to fake them, leading to the world's first black market in beard tokens. Somewhere out there, a sneaky Russian was probably forging beard coins in his basement, dreaming of a future where all facial hair was free. And so Russia became a land of smooth faces and secret beards. In the cities, men lined up to pay their tax and get their tokens. In the countryside, some brave souls hid their beards and hoped the taxman wouldn't notice. It was a hairy situation, to say the least. But Peter was happy. He thought he was making Russia modern one chin at a time. And for a while it worked. Portraits from the time show men with clean-shaven faces looking just a little bit nervous, as if they're waiting for someone to jump out and check their beard token. Meanwhile, the barbers of Russia were having the time of their lives. Business was booming. If you ever wanted to open a barbershop, this was your golden age. Every day, men lined up for shaves, trims, and maybe a little gossip about the latest beard tax scandal. Of course, not everyone was happy. Some men loved their beards. They saw them as a sign of wisdom, strength, or just a good way to keep warm in the Russian winter. Losing a beard was like losing a part of yourself, or at least losing your favorite face accessory. But Peter didn't care. He was on a mission. And so the great beard tax rolled on one coin at a time, one shave after another, until Russia was the smoothest it had ever been. The thing about Peter the Great was that he didn't do anything halfway. When he decided Russia needed to be more European, he went all in. And beards. Well, they were just the beginning. But let's stick with the facial hair for now, because honestly, the stories get pretty wild. Picture this. You're a wealthy merchant in Moscow, and you've spent years growing the most magnificent beard. It's your pride and joy, carefully groomed and oiled. Then one day, a government official shows up at your door with a little scale and a serious expression. Time to pay the beard tax, he says, and suddenly your face furniture has become a luxury item. The wealthy didn't mind too much. They could afford the tax, and some even saw it as a status symbol. Look at me, they seemed to say. I'm so rich I can afford to keep my beard. It was like having a designer handbag but on your face. The really wealthy merchants would polish their beard tokens and wear them on chains, showing off their ability to pay for facial hair. But the middle class, they were stuck in a hairy predicament. They wanted to look respectable, but the tax was a real burden. Some tried to negotiate, asking if they could pay half the tax for half a beard. Others attempted creative solutions like growing just a moustache or some strategic sideburns. The tax collectors were not amused. Then there were the clever ones who tried to game the system. Some men would grow their beards in secret, hiding them under fake clean-shaven masks when the tax collectors came around. Others would share beards with their neighbors. One day Ivan would wear the beard, the next day it would be Boris's turn. The authorities quickly caught on to these schemes, but you had to admire the creativity. The enforcement of the beard tax was quite the spectacle. Tax collectors would patrol the streets with scissors and razors, ready to give impromptu shaves to anyone who couldn't produce their token. Imagine walking down the street and suddenly finding yourself in an involuntary barbershop experience. Some men learned to run very fast when they saw the tax collectors coming. Public shaving became a form of entertainment. Crowds would gather to watch as bearded tax evaders got their comeuppance. It was like a medieval reality show, but with more hair and less dignity. The poor souls getting shaved would stand there probably wondering how their lives had come to this moment. The Orthodox Church had some interesting reactions to the beard tax. Many priests saw beards as a sign of religious devotion, and suddenly their parishioners were showing up clean-shaven and looking guilty about it. Some churches started offering beard blessings before men went to pay their tax, as if divine intervention might help them keep their facial hair. Meanwhile, the women of Russia were having mixed reactions. Some wives were thrilled to finally see their husbands' faces after years of marriage. "Oh, that's what you look like under there," was probably heard in many Russian households. Other women missed their husbands' beards and would secretly encourage them to grow them back, tax or no tax. The international community was watching this whole beard situation with great interest. Foreign diplomats would write letters home describing the strange Russian obsession with facial hair taxation. European visitors would arrive in Russia and be amazed to see men paying money for the privilege of looking scruffy. Peter himself was quite pleased with the results. He would walk through the streets of St. Petersburg, admiring all the smooth faces and thinking about how modern Russia looked. Sometimes he would stop random men and compliment them on their clean shaves, probably making them very nervous in the process. The beard token industry became surprisingly sophisticated. There were different designs for different social classes, and some tokens were more elaborate than others. Wealthy merchants might have gold-plated tokens, while regular citizens got simple copper ones. Counterfeit tokens became a real problem, leading to the appointment of official token inspectors. Some entrepreneurial Russians started beard rental services. For a small fee, you could borrow a beard for special occasions, then return it when you were done. It was like a library, but for facial hair. The logistics were complicated, but desperate times called for creative solutions. The psychological effects of the beard tax were fascinating. Men who had never seen their own chins suddenly had to get used to their new faces. Some didn't recognize themselves in mirrors. Others felt naked without their beards and would wear scarves even in summer to cover their bare faces. Children in Russia during the beard tax era had quite the educational experience. They would grow up seeing their fathers either proudly displaying beard tokens or nervously touching their smooth chins. Some kids became expert beard spotters, able to identify a tax evader from across the street. It was like a game, except the stakes were someone's facial hair and dignity. The seasonal aspects of the beard tax created interesting patterns. Winter was particularly cruel for the newly clean-shaven men. Russian winters are not kind to exposed skin, and suddenly having a bare face in sub-zero temperatures was a shock. Some men would develop elaborate scarf-wearing techniques to protect their faces, leading to a boom in the winter accessory market. Spring brought its own challenges. As the weather warmed up, men who had grown secret winter beards would have to decide whether to shave them off or finally pay the tax. It was like a seasonal confession time where hidden beards would emerge from under winter wrappings, much to the delight of the tax collectors who had been waiting patiently. The barber profession underwent a complete transformation during this period. Before, the beard tax barbers were mostly concerned with trimming and styling existing beards. Suddenly, they became the front line of Peter's modernization campaign. Some barbers embraced their new role as agents of change, while others felt conflicted about destroying the very beards they had spent years perfecting. Traveling barbers became common, moving from village to village with their scissors and razors. They were like circuit judges, but instead of dispensing justice, they were dispensing clean shaves. Some villages would declare shaving days when the traveling barber arrived, and men would line up like it was a festival. The economic ripple effects of the beard tax were surprising. The soap industry boomed as men needed to wash their newly exposed faces more frequently. Mirror sales increased dramatically as men tried to get used to their new appearances. Even the clothing industry was affected as men needed different collar styles to complement their bare faces. Regional variations in beard tax enforcement created interesting cultural differences. In some areas, tax collectors were strict and thorough. In others, they were more lenient, leading to underground beard networks where men would travel to beard-friendly regions for special occasions. It was like prohibition, but for facial hair. The documentation required for beard tax compliance became quite elaborate. Men needed to carry their tokens, but also paperwork proving they had paid. Some developed elaborate filing systems for their beard-related documents. Imagine having a whole drawer dedicated to facial hair bureaucracy. International trade was even affected by the beard tax. Foreign merchants visiting Russia would sometimes be confused by the local customs. Some would shave their beards before entering the country to avoid complications, while others would pay the tax as a kind of tourist fee. Russian customs officials became experts at beard assessment and taxation. The artistic community had mixed reactions to the beard tax. Portrait painters suddenly had to learn how to paint faces without beards, which was apparently more challenging than expected. Some artists specialized in before and after portraits, showing the same person with and without their beard. These became popular souvenirs of the beard tax era. Musicians wrote songs about the beard tax, some mournful ballads about lost facial hair, others celebratory tunes about the freedom of a clean shave. Street performers would act out comedic scenes about beard tax encounters, usually ending with someone getting an unwanted haircut. The medical community weighed in on the beard tax debate. Some doctors argued that beards were healthier, protecting the face from cold and disease. Others claimed that clean shaves were more hygienic. This led to heated medical debates, probably the only time in history that facial hair became a serious medical controversy. Women's fashion was indirectly influenced by the beard tax. With their husbands' faces suddenly visible, some women felt pressure to look more presentable as well. The cosmetics industry saw increased sales as couples tried to match their newly refined appearances. The psychological support industry, such as it was in the early 1700s, dealt with men suffering from beard loss trauma. Some men genuinely mourned their lost facial hair like they would mourn a deceased pet. Support groups formed where men would share stories about their former beards and comfort each other through the transition. Religious interpretations of the beard tax varied widely. Some saw it as a test of faith, others as divine punishment. A few enterprising religious leaders declared that clean shaves brought men closer to angels who were traditionally depicted without beards. This theological creativity helped some men feel better about their tax compliance. The record-keeping for the beard tax became a bureaucratic nightmare. Officials had to track who had paid, who hadn't, who was exempt, and who was trying to cheat the system. Entire government departments were dedicated to beard-related paperwork. Somewhere in Russian archives, there are probably detailed records of every taxed beard in the empire. The social dynamics of Russian society shifted in unexpected ways during the beard tax period. Suddenly, a man's facial hair status became a conversation starter. "Nice token" became a common greeting among the bearded elite. Clean-shaven men would nod knowingly at each other, sharing the unspoken bond of tax compliance or financial necessity. Dating and marriage customs were particularly affected by the beard tax. Young women had to adjust their expectations about potential suitors. Some preferred the clean-shaven look, finding it modern and sophisticated. Others missed the traditional bearded appearance and would secretly hope their boyfriends would grow their facial hair back after marriage. Matchmakers had to factor in beard tax affordability when arranging marriages. The generational divide became more pronounced during this era. Older men who had worn beards their entire adult lives felt like their identity was being stripped away along with their facial hair. Younger men who came of age during the tax period grew up thinking clean shaves were normal. Family dinners probably featured interesting discussions about the good old days when faces had more hair. Seasonal beard growing became a popular strategy among the financially creative. Some men would grow beards during the winter months when they could hide them under scarves and hats, then shave them off in spring to avoid the tax collectors' increased activity. It was like seasonal migration, but for facial hair. The black market for beard-related services flourished in ways that would make modern economists proud. Underground barbers offered secret beard maintenance for tax evaders. Fake token manufacturers worked overtime to meet demand. Some enterprising individuals even offered beard insurance. Pay a small fee, and they would cover your tax if you got caught with an illegal beard. Peter the Great's personal involvement in beard tax enforcement became legendary. He would sometimes personally inspect men's faces during public appearances, complimenting those who had paid their tax and making pointed comments to those who hadn't. Imagine having the Tsar himself critique your facial hair situation. The pressure must have been enormous. The international diplomatic implications of the beard tax were more significant than anyone expected. Foreign ambassadors had to navigate the complex etiquette of Russian facial hair politics. Some embassies issued guidelines to their staff about proper beard tax compliance. International incidents were narrowly avoided when visiting dignitaries were almost subjected to impromptu tax assessments. Rural enforcement of the beard tax created its own unique challenges. Tax collectors had to travel vast distances to reach remote villages where they would encounter men who hadn't heard about the new law. These encounters were probably quite dramatic. Imagine living in isolation and suddenly being told your face was taxable. Some villages developed elaborate warning systems to alert residents when tax collectors were approaching. The technological innovations that emerged from beard tax enforcement were surprisingly advanced for the time. Special measuring devices were created to assess beard length and fullness for taxation purposes. Standardized shaving tools were distributed to ensure uniform compliance. Some regions even developed early forms of photography to document tax compliance, though this was probably more trouble than it was worth. Women's roles in the beard tax system were more complex than initially apparent. Some wives became unofficial tax collectors, nagging their husbands to either pay up or shave off. Others became enablers, helping their husbands hide their beards or save money for the tax. A few entrepreneurial women started beard-related businesses, selling grooming supplies or offering shaving services. The psychological adaptation to life without beards varied dramatically among Russian men. Some embraced their new look and never grew beards again, even after the tax was eventually abolished. Others counted the days until they could return to their preferred facial hairstyle. A few developed what might be called phantom beard syndrome, unconsciously stroking chins that no longer had hair. Educational institutions had to adapt their curricula to include beard tax compliance. Young men needed to understand their future obligations regarding facial hair taxation. Some schools offered practical courses in shaving techniques and token maintenance. It was probably the only time in history that facial hair management became part of formal education. The entertainment industry of the time found rich material in the beard tax situation. Comedic plays featured bumbling tax collectors and crafty beard evaders. Puppet shows for children included characters with removable beards. Street performers developed elaborate routines around the theme of facial hair taxation, often ending with audience members getting mock shaves. Medical professionals reported interesting health effects related to the beard tax. Some men experienced skin problems when they first shaved off long-standing beards. Others reported feeling cold more frequently without their facial hair protection. A few claimed that losing their beards affected their sense of taste, though this was probably psychological rather than physiological. The record-keeping requirements for the beard tax created an entire bureaucratic industry. Clerks specialized in beard-related documentation. Filing systems were developed specifically for facial hair taxation records. Some government offices had entire rooms dedicated to beard tax paperwork, creating what might have been history's first specialized facial hair bureaucracy. The cultural impact of the beard tax extended far beyond simple facial hair management. Russian literature began incorporating beard-related themes into stories and poems. Writers would use beards as metaphors for tradition, rebellion, or social status. Some literary works from this period featured protagonists struggling with the moral dilemma of keeping their beards versus complying with the law. The fashion industry adapted remarkably quickly to the new clean-shaven reality. Clothing designers began creating garments that complemented bare faces rather than bearded ones. Collar styles changed to frame clean jawlines. Hat designs were modified to balance facial proportions without beards. It was a complete aesthetic revolution driven by tax policy. Religious communities developed various coping strategies for the beard tax. Some monasteries negotiated group exemptions, arguing that their beards were essential for spiritual purposes. Others established special funds to help monks pay the tax if they chose to keep their facial hair. A few progressive religious leaders embraced the clean-shaven look as a sign of spiritual renewal. The development of shaving technology accelerated during the beard tax period. Razor manufacturers worked overtime to meet the sudden demand for quality shaving equipment. New types of shaving soap were formulated for the harsh Russian climate. Some inventors even attempted to create mechanical shaving devices, though these early attempts were probably more dangerous than helpful. International trade relationships were affected by Russia's beard tax policy. Foreign merchants had to factor beard tax costs into their travel budgets when visiting Russia. Some countries began including beard tax information in their trade agreements with Russia. It was possibly the first time in history that facial hair became a legitimate diplomatic consideration. The enforcement mechanisms for the beard tax became increasingly sophisticated over time. Tax collectors developed specialized training programs to identify tax evaders and assess proper taxation levels. Some regions implemented beard inspection schedules where men had to report for regular facial hair assessments. The bureaucracy surrounding facial hair management became almost as complex as the tax itself. Children growing up during the beard tax era had a unique perspective on adult life. They watched their fathers navigate the complex world of facial hair taxation and learned early lessons about government authority and personal choice. Some children became quite skilled at spotting fake beard tokens or identifying tax evaders, turning enforcement into an inadvertent family activity. The economic data from the beard tax period reveals interesting patterns about Russian society. Tax collection records show seasonal variations in compliance, regional differences in payment rates, and demographic patterns in who chose to pay versus who chose to shave. These records provide historians with detailed insights into Russian social structure that might not otherwise be available. Women's perspectives on the beard tax were recorded in letters and diaries from the period. Some women appreciated seeing their husbands' faces more clearly, while others felt that clean-shaven men looked too young or unfamiliar. A few women reported that their husbands' personalities seemed to change along with their appearance, though this was probably more psychological than physiological. The medical profession developed new expertise in treating shaving-related injuries and skin conditions. Doctors began specializing in facial dermatology, treating men who experienced problems adapting to regular shaving. Some physicians even wrote treatises on proper shaving techniques and skincare, creating an early form of men's grooming literature. Regional variations in beard tax implementation created interesting cultural microclimates within Russia. Some areas became known for strict enforcement, while others developed reputations for leniency. Men would sometimes travel between regions to take advantage of different enforcement policies, creating a kind of facial hair tourism industry. The psychological effects of the beard tax on Russian society were profound and long-lasting. Men who lived through the transition often retained strong opinions about facial hair for the rest of their lives. Some became permanent advocates for clean shaving, while others grew elaborate beards as soon as the tax was lifted, as if making up for lost time. The administrative challenges of implementing the beard tax were enormous. Government offices had to create entirely new departments to handle facial hair taxation. Forms had to be designed, procedures established, and staff trained. The bureaucratic infrastructure required to tax beards was probably more complex than anyone initially anticipated. International observers documented the beard tax phenomenon extensively. Foreign visitors to Russia wrote detailed accounts of the facial hair taxation system, often with a mixture of amusement and bewilderment. These accounts provide valuable historical records of how the policy actually worked in practice beyond the official government documents. The social stratification effects of the beard tax were significant. The ability to afford the tax became a marker of social status, creating new class distinctions based on facial hair. Some men took pride in their expensive beard tokens, while others felt shame about their inability to afford them. It was a unique form of economic inequality based entirely on personal grooming choices. The artistic community found unexpected inspiration in the beard tax phenomenon. Portrait painters had to completely relearn their craft as they had spent years perfecting the art of painting magnificent beards. Suddenly they needed to master the subtleties of chin dimples, jawlines, and other facial features that had been hidden for decades. Some artists specialized in transition portraits, showing the same subject before and after their tax-mandated shave. Sculptors faced similar challenges when creating busts and statues of contemporary figures. The traditional heroic look, which almost always included an impressive beard, had to be abandoned in favor of the new, clean-shaven aesthetic. Some sculptors attempted to create removable beard attachments for their works, allowing viewers to see both versions of their subjects. The theatre world embraced the beard tax as rich source material for comedic performances. Traveling theatre companies developed entire acts around the theme of facial hair taxation. Popular characters included the bumbling tax collector who couldn't tell a real beard from a fake one, the vain nobleman who spent his fortune on beard tokens, and the clever peasant who outwitted the authorities with increasingly elaborate disguises. Musical compositions from this period often reference the beard tax in both serious and humorous ways. Folk songs emerged telling stories of men who lost their beards, their dignity or their savings to Peter's policy. Some songs became rallying cries for those who opposed the tax, while others celebrated the modern European look that clean shaves represented. The development of mirror technology accelerated during the beard tax era as men needed to see their newly revealed faces clearly. Mirror makers reported unprecedented demand for their products. Some enterprising craftsmen created specialized shaving mirrors with magnification features, while others developed portable mirrors for men who needed to check their compliance status while traveling. Educational institutions incorporated beard tax compliance into their curricula in creative ways. Mathematics teachers used beard tax calculations as practical examples for arithmetic lessons. History classes discussed the policy as an example of governmental authority and social change. Even geography lessons included references to regional variations in beard tax enforcement. The postal system was affected by the beard tax in unexpected ways. Men would send letters to relatives in other regions asking about local enforcement policies or seeking advice about compliance strategies. Some correspondence from this period reveals elaborate family discussions about whether grandfather should pay the tax or finally shave off his legendary beard. International diplomatic protocol had to be adjusted to accommodate Russia's unique facial hair policies. Foreign embassies developed guidelines for their staff regarding appropriate grooming standards when visiting Russia. Some diplomatic incidents were narrowly avoided when visiting dignitaries were almost subjected to beard tax assessments during formal ceremonies. The development of early advertising techniques can be traced partly to the beard tax period. Barbers began creating promotional materials advertising their shaving services. Soap manufacturers developed marketing campaigns targeting newly clean-shaven men. Token makers even advertised the quality and prestige of their beard tax medallions. Women's roles in Russian society shifted subtly during the beard tax era. Some wives became informal financial advisors helping their husbands budget for beard tax payments. Others took on new responsibilities managing household grooming supplies and schedules. A few entrepreneurial women established businesses catering to the new clean-shaven market. The psychological adaptation process for men losing their beards was more complex than anyone anticipated. Some experienced what might be called beard phantom syndrome, unconsciously reaching to stroke facial hair that was no longer there. Others reported feeling exposed or vulnerable without their traditional facial covering. Support networks developed among men going through similar transitions. Regional cuisine was even affected by the beard tax, as clean-shaven men discovered they could taste food more clearly without facial hair interfering with their eating experience. Some restaurants began advertising that their establishments were particularly welcoming to newly clean-shaven customers, offering special menus designed to showcase flavors that might have been muted by beards. The technological innovations that emerged from beard tax enforcement were surprisingly sophisticated. Specialized measuring devices were created to assess beard density and length for taxation purposes. Some regions developed early forms of identification systems to track tax compliance. A few areas even experimented with beard registration systems, creating what might have been history's first facial hair databases. Medical professionals reported interesting health trends related to the beard tax. Some men experienced improved dental hygiene once their mouths were no longer obscured by facial hair. Others reported increased susceptibility to cold weather without their natural face protection. A few physicians began specializing in treating shaving-related skin conditions and injuries. The economic ripple effects of the beard tax extended far beyond the direct tax revenue. The soap industry experienced unprecedented growth as men needed to wash their newly exposed faces more frequently. Clothing manufacturers had to adjust their designs to complement clean-shaven faces rather than bearded ones. Even the textile industry was affected as demand for face-covering scarves and mufflers increased among men missing their natural facial protection. The beard tax era also had a surprising impact on Russian social gatherings and celebrations. Imagine a wedding where the groom had to proudly display his beard token alongside his wedding ring. It became a symbol not just of marital commitment, but also of financial savvy. Guests would whisper about who had paid the tax and who had cleverly avoided it, making beard tokens a hot topic at every party. Festivals and fairs incorporated beard tax themes into their entertainment. There were beard token exchange booths, beard-themed games, and even contests for the most creative beard disguise. Children would dress up as tax collectors or bearded men, reenacting the great facial hair saga with giggles and enthusiasm. The culinary world found ways to celebrate the beard tax too. Special dishes were created that were said to be easier to eat without a beard getting in the way. Chefs experimented with flavors and textures catering to the newly clean-shaven clientele. Some restaurants even offered discounts to patrons who could show their beard tokens at the door. The literary scene blossomed with humorous pamphlets and satirical essays about the beard tax. Writers poked fun at the bureaucracy, the tax collectors, and the men who went to great lengths to keep their beards. These works were popular among the literate classes and helped spread awareness of the tax far and wide. The beard tax also influenced Russian language and expressions. New idioms and sayings emerged, such as to pay the beard toll or to shave off one's pride. These phrases became part of everyday conversation, reflecting the deep cultural imprint of the tax. In the world of fashion accessories, beard token holders became a trendy item. Crafted from precious metals and adorned with intricate designs, these holders were worn as necklaces, brooches, or even attached to hats. They were a subtle way to flaunt one's compliance and social status. The tax also sparked debates about personal freedom and government control. Philosophers and political thinkers of the time wrote treatises questioning the legitimacy of taxing something as personal as facial hair. These discussions contributed to the broader discourse on individual rights and state power in Russia. The enforcement of the beard tax created unexpected career opportunities. Professional beard inspectors emerged as a legitimate occupation, complete with training programs and certification processes. These inspectors developed keen eyes for detecting fake tokens, hidden beards, and creative compliance strategies. Some became quite famous for their ability to spot a tax evader from across a crowded marketplace. The seasonal nature of beard growth created interesting enforcement challenges. Spring was particularly busy for tax collectors, as men who had grown winter beards under heavy clothing suddenly found themselves exposed to scrutiny. Some developed elaborate seasonal grooming schedules, timing their beard growth and shaving cycles to minimize tax exposure. The international implications of the beard tax extended beyond simple diplomatic protocol. Foreign merchants began factoring beard tax costs into their business calculations when trading with Russia. Some countries even included beard tax considerations in their trade agreements, making facial hair a legitimate component of international commerce. The technological innovations that emerged from beard tax enforcement were surprisingly advanced for the early 18th century. Specialized measuring devices were created to assess beard density and length for taxation purposes. Some regions developed early identification systems to track tax compliance, creating what might have been history's first facial hair databases. The psychological effects of the beard tax on Russian society were profound and long-lasting. Men who lived through the transition often retained strong opinions about facial hair for the rest of their lives. Some became permanent advocates for clean shaving, while others grew elaborate beards as soon as the tax was lifted, as if making up for lost time. The administrative challenges of implementing the beard tax were enormous. Government offices had to create entirely new departments to handle facial hair taxation. Forms had to be designed, procedures established, and staff trained. The bureaucratic infrastructure required to tax beards was probably more complex than anyone initially anticipated. The social stratification effects of the beard tax were significant. The ability to afford the tax became a marker of social status, creating new class distinctions based on facial hair. Some men took pride in their expensive beard tokens, while others felt shame about their inability to afford them. It was a unique form of economic inequality based entirely on personal grooming choices. The beard tax era left a lasting legacy in Russian culture. Even after the tax was abolished, the memories and stories persisted. Older generations recounted tales of the tax with a mix of humor and nostalgia, while younger people learned about it as a curious chapter in their history. Museums began to collect beard tokens, shaving tools, and related artifacts, preserving them for future generations. The beard tax created unexpected opportunities for entrepreneurial Russians who saw profit in the facial hair chaos. Some clever individuals established beard consulting services, advising men on the most cost-effective grooming strategies. These consultants would analyze a client's facial hair growth patterns, financial situation, and social obligations to recommend the optimal approach to beard tax compliance. Underground beard maintenance services flourished in major cities. These secret operations would provide grooming services for men who wanted to keep their beards but couldn't afford the tax. Operating out of basements and back rooms, these illegal barbers developed sophisticated techniques for maintaining beards that could be quickly hidden when tax collectors appeared. The development of portable grooming kits became a booming industry during the beard tax era. Men needed to be able to quickly adjust their facial hair situation depending on their location and the presence of tax collectors. These kits included collapsible mirrors, compact razors, and quick-acting shaving soaps that could transform a bearded man into a clean-shaven citizen in minutes. Regional variations in beard tax enforcement created interesting migration patterns within Russia. Some areas became known as beard havens, where enforcement was lax, while others developed reputations as shaving zones with strict compliance requirements. Men would sometimes relocate their families to more beard-friendly regions, creating the world's first facial hair refugees. The psychological support industry, such as it existed in the early 1700s, had to adapt to help men cope with beard loss trauma. Some communities established support groups where men could share their experiences of losing their facial hair. These gatherings often resembled grief counseling sessions, with participants mourning their lost beards like deceased relatives. The beard tax influenced Russian architecture in subtle ways. Public buildings began incorporating more mirrors and better lighting to facilitate beard inspections. Some government offices installed special grooming stations where men could quickly adjust their appearance before official meetings. Private homes started including dedicated shaving areas, often near windows for optimal lighting. The international scientific community took interest in the Russian beard tax as a unique social experiment. Foreign scholars visited Russia to study the effects of government-mandated grooming policies on society. Their reports and studies provided valuable insights into human behavior, social compliance, and the relationship between personal appearance and political authority. The development of early photography was influenced by the beard tax period. Portrait photographers had to learn new techniques for capturing clean-shaven faces, which required different lighting and composition approaches than traditional bearded portraits. Some photographers specialized in before and after portraits, documenting men's transitions from bearded to clean-shaven appearances. The textile industry adapted to serve the newly clean-shaven population. Manufacturers developed softer fabrics for clothing that would come into direct contact with bare faces. Scarf and muffler production increased dramatically as men sought to protect their newly exposed skin from harsh weather. Some textile workers even specialized in creating fake beard attachments for theatrical and disguise purposes. The beard tax era saw the emergence of specialized legal services. Lawyers began offering advice on beard tax compliance, helping clients navigate the complex regulations and exemptions. Some legal professionals even specialized in defending men accused of tax evasion, developing expertise in facial hair law that would have seemed absurd in any other historical context. The educational system incorporated beard tax themes into various subjects. Mathematics teachers used tax calculations as practical examples, while social studies classes examined the policy's effects on Russian society. Art classes included lessons on drawing and painting faces without beards, a skill that had suddenly become much more relevant. The medical profession developed new specializations related to the beard tax. Dermatologists emerged to treat skin conditions caused by sudden changes in shaving habits. Some doctors even claimed expertise in beard withdrawal syndrome, though the scientific validity of this condition was questionable. Medical schools began including basic shaving instruction in their curricula. The entertainment industry found rich material in the beard tax situation. Comedic plays featured characters struggling with facial hair decisions, while dramatic works explored the deeper themes of personal freedom and government authority. Street performers developed elaborate routines around beard tax scenarios, often ending with audience participation in mock shaving ceremonies. The development of early market research can be traced partly to the beard tax period. Government officials needed to understand public opinion about the policy, leading to some of the first systematic surveys of citizen attitudes. These early polling efforts provided valuable data about social acceptance of government grooming mandates. The beard tax period coincided with significant changes in Russian social customs and etiquette. Traditional greeting rituals had to be modified when men could no longer stroke their beards thoughtfully during conversations. New gestures emerged to replace beard stroking, such as chin rubbing or jaw touching, though these never quite achieved the same dignified effect as the classic beard stroke. Marriage customs underwent interesting adaptations during the beard tax era. Matchmakers had to factor in a potential groom's beard tax status when arranging marriages. Some families preferred clean-shaven suitors as a sign of modernity and compliance, while others sought bearded men as symbols of traditional values and financial stability. Wedding portraits from this period show an interesting mix of facial hairstyles depending on family preferences and tax compliance strategies. The development of early consumer protection laws can be traced partly to beard tax enforcement issues. Fake beard tokens became such a problem that regulations were needed to protect consumers from counterfeit grooming certificates. This led to some of the first government standards for official documentation, establishing precedents that would influence Russian bureaucracy for centuries. Religious communities developed creative theological interpretations of the beard tax. Some progressive religious leaders argued that clean shaves brought believers closer to divine purity, while traditionalists maintained that beards were essential for spiritual authority. A few enterprising clergy members offered special beard blessing services, charging fees to sanctify facial hair before tax payment. The seasonal business cycles created by the beard tax were remarkable. Winter months saw increased demand for face-warming accessories as clean-shaven men struggled with cold weather exposure. Spring brought booming business for barbers, as men emerged from winter hiding with overgrown facial hair. Summer was peak season for beard token sales, while autumn saw men preparing for winter beard strategies. International trade relationships were affected in unexpected ways by Russia's facial hair policies. Foreign merchants had to budget for potential beard tax expenses when planning business trips to Russia. Some countries began including beard tax considerations in their trade negotiations, making facial hair a legitimate component of international commerce agreements. The development of early advertising techniques accelerated during the beard tax period. Barbers created promotional materials advertising their shaving services to newly compliant customers. Soap manufacturers developed marketing campaigns targeting the clean-shaven demographic. Even beard token makers advertised the prestige and quality of their taxation medallions. The psychological effects of mass facial hair removal on Russian society were studied by early social observers. Some men reported feeling more youthful and energetic after shaving their beards, while others experienced identity confusion and social anxiety. Support networks developed among men going through similar grooming transitions, creating some of history's first appearance-based support groups. The technological innovations that emerged from beard tax enforcement were surprisingly sophisticated for the early 18th century. Specialized measuring devices were created to assess beard density and taxation levels. Some regions developed early identification systems to track compliance status. A few areas even experimented with beard registration databases, creating primitive facial hair record-keeping systems. The economic data from the beard tax period provides fascinating insights into Russian social structure and spending patterns. Tax collection records reveal seasonal variations in compliance, regional differences in payment rates, and demographic patterns in who chose to pay versus who chose to shave. These records offer historians detailed information about Russian society that might not otherwise be available. The enforcement mechanisms became increasingly sophisticated over time. Tax collectors developed specialized training programs to identify violations and assess proper taxation levels. Some regions implemented regular inspection schedules where men had to report for facial hair assessments. The bureaucracy surrounding beard taxation became almost as complex as the tax itself. The cultural legacy of the beard tax extended far beyond its official duration. Stories and legends about clever tax evasion schemes became part of Russian folklore. Families passed down tales of ancestors who outwitted the beard collectors or paid fortunes to keep their facial hair. These stories became part of the national narrative about individual resistance to government overreach. The international scholarly community took great interest in the Russian beard tax as a unique social experiment. Foreign academics visited Russia to study the effects of government grooming mandates on society and culture. Their research and observations provided valuable insights into human behavior, social compliance, and the relationship between personal appearance and political authority. As the years passed, the beard tax became so deeply embedded in Russian society that many people couldn't imagine life without it. Children who grew up during this period considered beard taxation to be a normal part of adult life, like paying rent or buying bread. They would play games involving mock beard inspections and pretend to be tax collectors, turning the policy into childhood entertainment. The long-term social effects of the beard tax were more profound than Peter the Great probably anticipated. An entire generation of Russian men came of age believing that facial hair was a luxury item rather than a natural part of masculine appearance. Some never grew beards, even after the tax was eventually abolished, having internalized the idea that clean shaves were the proper way for modern men to look. The administrative infrastructure created for beard tax collection became a model for other government taxation systems. The detailed record-keeping inspection procedures and compliance monitoring techniques developed for facial hair taxation were later adapted for other purposes. In a way, Russian bureaucracy learned important lessons about systematic taxation from the humble beard tax. The international reputation of Russia was significantly influenced by the beard tax policy. Foreign visitors would return to their home countries with amusing stories about the Russian obsession with facial hair taxation. These tales spread throughout Europe, contributing to Russia's reputation as a land of unusual customs and innovative government policies. The economic impact of the beard tax extended far beyond the direct revenue it generated. Entire industries emerged to serve the needs created by the policy. The grooming supply industry, the token manufacturing sector, and the compliance consulting business all owed their existence to Peter's facial hair taxation experiment. Some of these businesses continued operating long after the tax itself was abolished. The technological innovations that emerged from beard tax enforcement had lasting effects on Russian society. The identification system's measurement techniques and documentation procedures developed for facial hair taxation were later applied to other areas of government administration. The beard tax period inadvertently contributed to the modernization of Russian bureaucratic systems. The cultural memory of the beard tax became part of Russian national identity. Stories about the policy were passed down through generations, becoming part of the country's folklore and collective memory. Even today, historians and cultural scholars study the beard tax period as an example of how government policies can have unexpected and far-reaching social consequences. The artistic legacy of the beard tax era includes numerous paintings, sculptures, and literary works that documented or commented on the policy. These cultural artifacts provide valuable insights into how Russian society perceived and adapted to the facial hair taxation system. Museums now display beard tokens, shaving implements, and related artifacts as important historical objects. The psychological studies conducted during and after the beard tax period contributed to early understanding of how appearance changes affect personal identity and social relationships. The mass grooming transformation experienced by Russian men provided researchers with unique data about the connection between physical appearance and psychological well-being. The legal precedents established during the beard tax era influenced Russian law for decades afterward. The procedures developed for tax collection, the appeals processes created for disputed assessments, and the exemption systems established for special cases all became models for future taxation policies. The beard tax helped establish important principles about government authority and individual compliance. As Peter the Great aged and his priorities shifted, the enforcement of the beard tax gradually became less strict. Tax collectors became more lenient, exemptions were granted more freely, and the penalties for non-compliance were reduced. The policy slowly faded away, not through official repeal, but through gradual neglect and changing social attitudes. The end of the beard tax era was marked by a gradual return to traditional Russian grooming customs. Men who had been clean-shaven for years began growing beards again, often with great ceremony and celebration. Barbers who had specialized in shaving services had to relearn the art of beard trimming and styling. The pendulum of facial hair fashion swung back toward traditional Russian preferences. The historical legacy of the beard tax continues to fascinate scholars and the general public alike. It represents a unique moment in history when government policy directly interfered with personal grooming choices, creating a natural experiment in social control and individual adaptation. The stories, artifacts, and cultural memories from this period provide valuable insights into human nature and the relationship between authority and personal freedom. And so ends the tale of Russia's great beard tax experiment, a curious chapter in history that reminds us how even the most unusual government policies can have profound and lasting effects on society, culture, and individual lives.